My name's Peter Martin, and I'm an artist based in Sheffield, and I also do a lot of filmmaking, community engagement work, photography. I guess I've got lots of different disciplines that kind of all feed into my practice. The film For an Open Ground was based around this area, the immediate area around Bloc. This is an area that I walk through or cycle through every day, but it's also an area that I don't really have that much connection with, in the sense that there's lots that goes on behind the scenes. So I'm kind of connected with it in the sense that I cycle through it every day and I observe the change. But yeah, I never really knew what was going on beneath the surface before. The job of the film was for me to kind of immerse myself in this area and speak to as many people as possible and try and uncover what it was about this area that was interesting. So despite being local to Sheffield, I felt like an outsider at the start of the process. The selection process for the interviews was really interesting. People knew I was doing the project and people just kind of started coming to me. So the first person I spoke to was Richard Bartle, who is a studio manager at Bloc, and he had loads of really interesting things to say as someone who'd been in the area locally, and he kind of pointed out lots of other little local places and local things that I should speak to. And then the more people that I spoke to and the more people who approached me, I just started to build this little tree of different people who had these different connections for different reasons and different motivations. So I kind of took this tree and just tried to interview as many people as possible. So all in all, I interviewed 17 different people or businesses. When I first started making the film, it kind of started as an observational documentary where I just go around and speak to as many different people as possible and just kind of get a feel for the area. The more the documentary came together, I started to get a more personal attachment to the area. I guess that was mainly because throughout the process, my approach was to just speak to one gatekeeper who would then lead me to another person, who would then lead me to another person. So I was just kind of knocking on doors and trying to speak to as many local people as possible, because the diversity in the area is absolutely massive. You've got DIY punk spaces next door to a football pub, next door to like a cafe that's kind of built around the premise of like the Budapest kind of Berlin ruin bars. So those three things sit together in perfect harmony. So I was just kind of trying to speak to all these different people and try and figure out how this kind of all comes together. So yeah, it started out as an observational documentary, but became a participatory documentary because I felt the longer I was filming people, the more I was kind of including myself in the film. It's really interesting to think about how we define worth. And lots of people talk about that worth differently. J-Wing talk about worth in the sense that they've brought loads of jobs to the area, and that's fantastic. It improves the economy and it gives people meaningful work. But then you've got somewhere like the Lug Hole, which gives people a home. Lots of punk bands can kind of just float around and not really exist in a meaningful way. But as soon as you give people like that a home, that's why people stay in cities. So, and that adds massive cultural value. So this idea of worth is really interesting. Then you've got worth of like individuals. So when you look at Pinders, you have people who are doing these small industrial tasks, but they're still battling to keep these industries alive, giving people worth. Like, would those jobs be replaceable? What would those people do if they couldn't make hip flasks anymore? So it's the idea of what this worth is, and I think that's something that we'll be able to reflect on. Maybe if you're looking at the film in 10 years' time and what worth we've kind of lost and what we've still got, and maybe evaluate what was the most important from that. The themes that came up only really showed up during the editing process. The first chapter was kind of all about change and how different people have occupied the space over different times. So you used to have loads of blue-collar workers running around. Now you've got loads of artists running around, and you've got people who want to take a chance on something and start a studio or start a recording studio. They kind of can. So it's about those kind of people and how everything is changing in the area, but also how everything is up for grabs. The second theme that came up was Jeopardy. So there's lots of people who invested and made a space and created something, and it was just taken away from them through to redevelopment of the area. So you'd have a music studio who would support and develop loads of different bands. You have a punk venue that kind of gives a whole community its home. You have a cafe that becomes a hub for loads of creative businesses. And all these things are kind of really under threat, and as the area changes, they could all quite easily disappear. So the Jeopardy thing was really prominent in the second half of the film. And then the third theme was how everything has been reflected through history. Speaking to Laura in the film just kind of showed that it's always been like this, and things are always constantly changing around here due to the nature of the space. And then lastly, it was just more of like a personal reflections and trying to capture the moments and the small incidents and why these kind of funny, strange spaces mean so much to people. I think this definitely crosses a line between my arts practice and my kind of work as a filmmaker that I've done for charities and things like that in the past. The bits where I'm just straight interviewing people and asking questions, that is definitely, just from a very traditional kind of approach. But then the kind of art in this is the fact that I had no predetermined outcomes, and then I just wanted to generate as much content as possible and then just kind of make it into something at the end. And especially with the little vignettes of moments that are kind of observed. I was thinking a lot about William White's social lives of small urban spaces, and I was thinking a lot about that kind of John Smith's kind of Girl Chewing Gum, and those kind of really observational things where you just plonk yourself down as a camera and just sit and wait. And there's loads of like 10-second clips in the film of just observing things that are taken from clips that are maybe 20 minutes long, that I've just found a specific moment that means something to me. So I guess that's kind of where the art of the film is. And then, yeah, it's just a collaboration between both of those things. And it's kind of like two sides of my personality in the same time. But yeah, I felt completely comfortable with that, and I really enjoyed bringing those two worlds together because I'd never done that before in my work.